Let's take a look. There's a torso. Okay, so let's say we've got a rib cage here. With arms out here. Center here. And hips in here. All right, so let's say, didn't do it that way because I was trying to figure out where it went. But let's say there's my gesture line, stretching line, or I can break it down a little more complicated here into several stretches, and it can go all the way up into this. Just got that one. All right, so as soon as I started adding stuff, the complicated spine, the barrel, the rib cage, as soon as I even started to refine my structure, my gesture started to suffer a little bit, didn't it? Let's pull this out this way, make it wider. That's a problem. We'll save that problem for a few minutes here. Let's just worry about structure now. What's the strategy? Now, my construction lines tell the tale. They're telling me exactly what needs to happen. All the way through. We've got to feel the rib cage this way. Like that, and then we get up on here, maybe the neck goes that way. We're not going to worry about the neck. That means anytime I have a contour, for whatever reason, that overlaps high into low, that's going to reinforce my perspective. So we have an overlap there. We have an overlap here. Overlaps the arm, helps put the arm away from us that way. Overlaps the rib cage, helps put the rib cage under this way. All those overlaps are great, and they can be a little tiny overlap, or they can be a great and powerful overlap that extends a great distance. We don't really care too much. Now, if I can get that overlap to insert in some of the side and the end to insert in, now I've got an interlock. That's a drumstick idea. Narrow bone, narrow tendon, ligament connections, thick muscle, sometimes thick bone like a skull or rib cage. And it inserts in, and that's good stuff. That reinforces it. Sometimes the axis, how it's tilted, tipped, or distorted. Notice the axis of our shoulder blade, let me lay it in here under all this gobbledygook muscle, drops down. Sometimes the contour itself, for example, let's say the pinching rib cage. So pretend it pinches all the way across against the obliques. Pinching spine against the lower back, those erector muscles in the lower back. All those contours reinforce. And then sometimes we can use closure. So we can use see here. We can use the tricep on top of that tendinous connection to the elbow. And we can use the other tricep here. And whatever little detail there. And something at or near the sides, something at or near the center, you'll make that connection across. And we'll see others as we move along, but that gives us, let's do one here. Let's pretend this is down on top. So we've got the overlapping obliques. We've got the pinching oblique against the sacral area. And then we have the little tailbone. I'll just put it way low here. Tailbone here. Notice that's way deeper than the real perspective, but that's okay. It gives us that sense of being on top of. And notice how the tones can help track, help reinforce the closure and fill the gaps all or partially to make sure the audience is moving in the right way. Like so. So we can move throughout. And I'll show you some more renderings. Well, I guess I'll do some of it now. So now let's light this. And so that we can use line and tone. And let's say that we have a shadow shape on that spine. And notice if I want that to be rounded, I'm going to use my zigzag technique. We'll use this with our great Strathmore paper too, same technique. And I want to make sure that I know where the beginning of the form is, the end of the form is, and the shadow shape will be where the form turns. That's the corner. And I'm going to keep it open-ended. I'm not going to render above. I'm not going to render below because I got to figure out how the rib cage morphs into this shoulder girdle above and waist and hips below. But by adding some halftone, a little or a lot, I can now take that corner and round the corner. And also I can complete the connection. I can give you a sense of how the rib cage, the bulging rib cage, separates out, builds out from the surrounding forms of the waist and such.
I think the depth and structuring of the courses on New Masters Academy really stands out, just the variety of topics that were being taught at New Masters. And they're all taught by industry professionals and very experienced teachers. I think it's really important for building like a solid understanding, and that allows you to really fully express yourself.
And I can come back and reinforce, make sure I reinforce slightly the corner, which is that core shadow. And by reinforcing that, notice that it gives a feeling of reflected light without having to render it. It gives a feeling of that secondary light, that indirect light that fills and creates its own reverse gradation of lighter shadow to darker shadow at the core, but it does it without having to think about it. So by reinforcing the corner, we reinforce the idea of structure as a corner, but also it takes care of a lot of the rendered detail. We don't have to think it through. We don't have to analyze it and work it out. It takes care of itself more or less. And I can get this big form and then go on down and get another big form, or I can get every single form or a lot of the forms across, however I want. But I'm going to basically take a section, work across. That didn't work very well, did it? Take a section and work across, and then go down. And then take another section, work across, and go down, or go up, work across. And that's going to be how I make sure each form fits and flows and works together. If the forms are pinching, binding, if they meet on a gesture line that is becoming concave, going from convex to concave, an S curve, then you're going to see that the forms are starting to separate and show their own character. And that's why I have so much tone and shape change in that shadow, and maybe also in the contour. Big binding overlapping contours. We're going to have a big change. We're going to see this kind of zigzag action. Zig and zag before it goes down again. So when you see zigzags, binding contours, zigzagging shadows, that's the forms fighting and separating out. So let's pick up here. And I can plot out every form like a little egg box or ball, or I can get the big forms and let the little forms take care of themselves. So here I'm going to let a little form take care of itself. There's a little wobble, there's some structure up in the shoulder girdle I'm not sure of. I just know it wobbles like that. As long as I'm tracking well the big bulging rib cage, working together, I don't have to explain the little imperfections. I can just put them in there and let them make the audience think I'm smarter than I am, make it look sophisticated. Here's a cast shadow. This side of the rib cage is a big enough structure that it casts a shadow over our receding structure, the other side of the rib cage. And notice how I'm orchestrating. That's my new favorite word lately, orchestrate. I'm orchestrating. I want to think like a orchestra conductor with the wand, this to this. I want to bring these two instruments into harmony. They need to be hitting the same notes for the same song on the same gestural rhythm. Every art form has that problem of orchestrating the dance steps, the scenes, the characters, the colors, the gestures into a greater whole, and we call that gesture or color harmony or rhythm. And so you can see how it goes. And notice how if I'm moving with my zigzag, I'm moving along the long axis of the form by rendering this way. And so by going along the long axis of this form, I'm going to be able to get a really beautiful rendered gradation that's going to sculpt my structure in exactly the manner I want it. But also I'm going along the long axis of the form, so I'm rendering the gesture, aren't I? And so notice these little marks. These just happened. And yet they kind of ring true, don't they? Because they're moving along that gestural edge. So all these imperfections are little visual arrows that are getting us to flow in the right manner. And that's terrific. So everything's, I'm in the flow on this, where everything is working for me consciously and unconsciously. My process, my technique is all serving each other. I'm not fighting it. And that's going to make life way, way easier. And you're going to end up getting these happy accidents like this, where the audience will go, that's amazing that you were able to do that. I can't believe you understood those forms, made it work. And it just happened because you were connected to your material and your process, and it comes out the way it needs to come out. And likewise, you can just kind of wing it and say, well, my composition needs something here. I don't know what the heck that is in terms of muscle. I don't even know if it really is a muscle, but it's going to track over my rounded form in my tilted perspective and move down my fluid gesture. And it's going to feel right. Okay, so everything has a connectivity to it. Notice how everything's orchestrated, everything's tracked, on and on and on. And then we can take these lovely little creations here, say that zigzag there, and we can pull it down into the form shadow of the erector muscle, erector group of the spine. And in the shadows, I can do the same thing in tone or in line. Give me a moment here to fuss around. And notice how we get now a new kind of connectivity. Now we get an extra special interlock. We'll call it a Denny's buffet interlock. That's a incredibly good food. No, I'm kidding. It's a kind of a meat and potatoes chain in America. And notice how we didn't just get the old drumstick. We've now got this tail of insertion. And remember how muscles work. They go down below, way below, usually to anchor, and the farther it can go into the accompanying bone, the more leverage you have. And so for example, the Achilles tendon on the foot starts at the heel, the calcaneus of the foot, and goes all the way up into the muscle and above into the hamstring, to be able to lift all this weight off the ground. And so the farther you can take these structures and in a minute, in a little bit, we'll see gestures, the more convincing and the more pleasing it will be. It'll just feel right. And it won't matter if it really is right, it will feel right. Because you're following, you have a worldview, basically. Everything is moving over the form if it's a structure, and everything is moving between the forms if it's a gesture. Even a little pinch, little series of pinch, each little pinch is its own little hose shape, and yet they're all working back, in that greater whole. Every little pinch is tracking. And of course, you can actually allow the technique to do the same thing. We could hatch and cross-hatch as a Michelangelo, Del Sarto, the whole Renaissance crowd, those Renaissance groupies, can track over too. And the technique, the paint strokes, can do the work too. So on and on and on. Now, here's the problem. Let's say I did what I teach and I started with that line there. And by the end, we're not even at the end of it, but by the end of my rendering process, look at what that poor thing turned into. Instead of this lovely, beautiful, graceful gesture, and my first gesture line here could have been that into that, that into that. Instead of those lovely, gorgeous, composing lines, pulling it all together in this wash of beauty. Now we've got this and 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 this. Now that's great for structure. I did a fine job. I'm proud of myself. If I could, I'd hug myself for how well I did my structure. But it's ruined my gesture. So what's a guy to do? What's an artist to do? Well, what we can do is a couple things. We can use the Eng method. Ingres. Jean-Dominique Eng. He had about 6 other names in there. And you can quiet them down. And that's a good strategy, and it's a strategy I would tend to use. Play these down. So instead of doing that kind of thing, let's do that kind of thing. Now it's a little quieter than it was, isn't it? That helps, doesn't it? So now it's not near as bad as it was. Well, again, that's kind of a desperate strategy, isn't it? Especially if I need to, there's certain key dynamic, tension-filled moments, dramatic moments I need to show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break the contour. And instead of staying on this edge, and instead of quieting it down or just quieting it down, I'm going to come inside. As often as I can. And there'll still be moments maybe where it gets wobbly. Almost certainly there will be. Let me add in some of this stuff down here. All right, what the heck did he just do? All right, forgive that leg being a little out of whack, but... All right, so now I'm going to try and break the contour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look inside, and I'm going to see if I can't find something to use closure with to line up. So I'm going to use that. This little gluteus medius. I'll use the fibers of the gluteus maximus. I'll use the cast shadow going across that leg there. I'll use anything I can. I'll even, you'll see the old masters do this, I'll even lighten the lineup. So I'll ghost back that line, I'll make that bigger, and that bigger, and that bigger. And this just screws me up, doesn't it? Gets right in the way. Just get a little bit of stuff here to be in the way. There's all sorts of stuff going on here. Whatever's going on there with the neck. And I'll pick up there. Maybe I'm off the page now, but maybe it'll go up into the skull, the back of the skull or the temple line or behind the ear there. And then I'll see if I can't find little places to pick it up in there. But now what I've got is through closure, something even better. And if I understand that early enough, let me take a look at my distorted figure from the side, I can play that up over here. So that there's my gesture. I'm going to throw my tube way over here. Remember, the tube is just a three-dimensional gesture line. And now I'm going to play this up. I'm going to give this guy a bigger back. And that's why you'll see, one of the reasons, you'll see like a Pontormo drawing a bunch of lines, finding that rhythm, that connectivity. And look at the work halftone does for us. It keeps the gesture alive. It integrates, makes that connectivity across the form as it flows through the form. Now I'll pull that way over there. And now we've got this pushing even more. And so what we had as a beginning gesture line, let's put it over here, now becomes that potentially. And we can really play down all those lumps and bumps, or we can play up a major corner. So now all that moves over a corner, so it gets even sharper. Really overdo that corner so you can see it. And it gets more and more dynamic. And then, if you need to add the lumps and bumps, as you invariably will, even if you're ang, it's not such a big deal. And you can also create this kinetic effect. Notice we could have played this up here. Now I'm going to come all the way around here and up, and then behind the ear and into the eye socket or cheekbone or up into the temple line. And I could have played it here as our cable muscles our hood pulls us back down. That's the collar, that's the shoulder blade, but the isthmus can come right here, or over here, or back up here. And notice now the wild rides, we have an almost infinite way of moving and interlacing, aligning through closure every fiber of, I like that, fibrils. We'll call them muscle fibrils from now on. Every fiber of the deltoid can be another rhythm, can't it? Yeah, that's what we did with our gluteus here. Every gluteal striation of the muscle ended up being a potential new rhythm going through. Every tendinous connection through the down through the hand into the wrist and forearm could be a new rhythm. And so this just is stuck, but really not, huh? And it can move into this and move into this. And even into the hatching, it can move around this way. And you can have all sorts of fun. And lead your audience on this incredibly wild ride. So you can see the seductive power of going Baroque, Rococo, big budget Hollywood blockbuster. It can get so dramatic and, of course, so over-dramatic, so melodramatic. But, I mean, it's a lot of toys to play with. And so it takes actually, in my mind, I've spent a lot of years now playing with this. In fact, I will actually, and you'll see Pontormo, and you'll see comic book artists, that's where I got it from, those folks. You can actually see the speed lines where now those are kinetic movements, ghosted images of time lapse. But they're also rhythms that keep the eye going in ever new, energetic, maybe nervous and neurotic ways, or heroic, dynamic, adventurous ways, however you want to do it. And so everything that we draw is going to have a rhythm to it, an orchestration where it is one thing. It's a shadow, but it relates back to the light through the halftone, through the contour. The form relates to the gesture. The gesture finds hidden gestures, hidden rhythms that show new and wondrous forms. The technique is constantly moving along the corner of the form, but potentially down the length of the gesture at the same time. Or it's like a tap dance, it's a hop, skip, and a jump to make that move through a hatching or painterly strokes. If you look at the painters that are great draftsmen, most of the time, and especially when there's a drawing problem, they're going to work down the long axis with their stroke. Most, 90%, 92%, 92.6% of Sargent's strokes are down the long axis. Because look what we get. If I go down the long axis of the nose with that highlight or core shadow, I've described where the side meets the front. I've described structure. And so I can create these long axis ribbons of planes, like the long facets of a diamond. You'll see in Zorn's painting, he leaves those long painterly strokes there. Sargent tends to blend them a little bit more, but it'll move down the long axis. If I'm going to go down the cheek, I'm not going to go this way. I'm going to go down the longest possible axis for that cheek and for any form I'm drawing. Always down the long axis. I can also move you across this way through a curve, an S curve, to move over the tube, over to the other side for the dynamic, and to show that moving off axis for that organic form, so it's not too simplified. But as I show those structural planes moving from beginning to end of the form, I'm also, of course, showing the gesture flowing down from one idea to the next. And so those long axis strokes are by far the most efficient and helpful and descriptive marks we can make. And that's why most of our realist painters who know their drawing skills will do that. Not everyone, and sometimes the technique, the medium will have a say in it. Degas pastels tend to be cross-hatched. But it's incredibly seductive, and it's why I don't use long axis strokes all that much in my paintings, because everybody does it, and everybody wants to be a Sargent, me included. And so with everybody doing it, you better start looking someplace else. But I'll use them when I need them. But I'll make it chaotic. Since my stuff's about bundled energy, I'll let the drawing do all this work, and then I'll fill in with gradations within those shapes with this kind of quantum energy of strokes, kind of almost a Jackson Pollock, blasting splatter of strokes. So, and I do it really not because it's the best solution. It works conceptually for my work, but because I can't do the Sargent. Everybody else is doing it, so I don't want to be the same as it. But every once in a while, I really need to draw something correctly, carefully work it out, or I just need that shape to go that direction. Then I go back to that because it's so incredibly valuable. Okay, so that's what we're up for. You don't have to do a whole figure. You can just pick an area. Just pick a couple, the upper arm and forearm, the rib cage and pelvis, and try out some of this and see if you can't work out those ideas. You start the same. Gesture line, simple 2-box ball structure. And then as you start building those forms, orchestrate them so that you're moving over the form through all of our strategies or a few of our strategies. And you can just draw and then go back and see. Now, why did that drawing that I just did look so good? Oh, there we go. I'm feeling the interlock of that structure. I'm feeling the axis of those shapes moving up and over. All my detail is going down and under to show I'm on top of it. There's a lot of closure going on. I start and I finish and I get them to turn through that position. And as I draw that structure, I get a great out that takes me into the next gesture. And I'm going to try now to break the contour and see if I can hop, skip, and jump to make a longer, more hidden, a sneakier connection to hold the whole thing together, to make it cohere. Can I make it all work in a way that the audience will feel but won't really be able to nail down? It'll be that secret sauce that makes it such a great meal.